two things that by faith he built. He built the ark. And then, second thing is, he condemned. He condemned the world. Well, these are the two things that highlight. But it took faith to build the ark, and it took faith to condemn the world. They're really closely related to us. Because this has to do with, he built an ark. It has to do with his career, his work. Because he spent 120 years to build that ark. So obviously that means there was a change in his career. We don't know what he was doing, but at the age of about 500, he started to build this ark. At the age of 500, there was another change in his life. He had 3 children. So there was a change in the family, and there was a change in his workplace. It's very interesting to know this man, because he believed, it changed the way he lived. When somebody becomes a Christian, when you have faith in God, you end up changing the way you live. If you believe that Jesus Christ is Lord of your life, then it has to change the way you live. I mentioned before that you do not have to change your career, but it has to change the way you work, your attitude. You as a teacher, you as a scientist, when you come to know Jesus Christ, he doesn't ask you to change your career, but you should change the way you work. So it's obvious when he spent 120 years building that ark, people thought he was crazy. They would have already talked about this. Why are you doing this? And then he says, because of the wickedness of this world, God's going to judge. In that sense, he condemned the world. Right? So he did not look at the culture the way the world understands the culture. He understood the culture by faith, what God said about that culture. Because no one thought that culture was wicked. No one thought that world was sinful. Until God says, I'm going to destroy this world. He believed that, and he began to look at his life, his culture, differently. So there's a faith that actually changed the way he lived, and faith changed the way he looked at the world. Perspective and attitude. When he's looking at the world, his perspective has changed. Here, you can say, his attitude towards his work. Faith changed the attitude, the way he worked, and his perspective of the world has changed. Right, those are the two things, and how that actually relates to us. What is faith? How faith can change the way we live, our attitude towards work, and how faith can change our perspective of looking at this world. Okay? I want to make distinction. What makes Noah to build that ark was based on faith and not based on experience. I want to make a distinction. When we talk about faith, biblical faith, too often we tend to think that faith is related to our experience. Here's what I mean by it. In the Bible, when Bible talks about faith, they're never talking about our experience. What does that mean? We believe, we trust based on our experience. I'm looking at a resume, I go through the resume and I see all this. Oh, he graduated from this school and this and that, and got a reference, I give the call. Yeah, he's a really good guy. Okay, I trust him. What does that mean? That's not biblical faith. That is simply based on my experience of looking at the resume and reviewing it, and then I said, okay, I trust. Here's what I mean by that. When God says, when you eat this, you will surely die. To obey that, you need faith. Why is that? Because if Adam witnessed somebody actually died, then when God says, you eat this, you're going to die, then immediately he's going to make connection with what God says, what he witnessed, what he experienced. That's not faith. Because death never came into this world much later. As a matter of fact, 900 years later it came. So nobody experienced death. So when God said, you eat this and you're going to die, unless you have faith, there is no way you're going to obey God. Does that make sense? Right? So this is what I mean. You have to distinguish the experience and faith. But a lot of times we think, well, I don't have faith because I haven't experienced it. Well, that's not faith. So when people say, I will believe in God if I could only see God, if I could only experience God. No. That's experience. That is not faith. So this is why it is so crucial for Noah. Because until Noah built the ark, and for 120 years, once they enter into the ark, the rain started to come down. That means for over 1,000 years, people never experienced rain. And I wrote everything on that material. When God says, I'm going to pour down rain, and I'm going to cover the whole earth with water, people are saying, what? Water coming down? Never heard of that. If they experience some type of local flood, then they can say, oh my goodness, there's a possibility. There might be a judgment. You see, now you're based on your experience. This is not about experience, Dad. They never experienced flood. There is a group of people called Christian scientists or creationists. They study the Bible and they try to understand how the science can help us to understand the Bible, not reject the Bible. According to the scientists, 40 days of rain will never be enough to cover the entire world. That will be impossible. But the Bible is writing that rained 40 days, but not enough, but the great stream below the earth. It burst open. So you have the rain, and then you have the spring water burst open. But the scientists were saying, but 40 days is still not enough. You need at least 3 months or 6 months of rain to cover the entire world. So they're saying, how is that possible? Scientifically, before the flood, the earth, the atmosphere had water like a vapor or ice covered it. The ozone layer. When God created this world, the water covering it. This earth, this created a greenhouse effect. So a lot of scientists believe that during this time, they had a dinosaur. Everything was much larger at that time. It was most ideal, so there was no sickness, or it was a perfect environment for human to live. You had this water, when God brought the judgment, this melted. So we're not talking about just rain, but 40 days when this broke, the Bible says that this broke. Within 40 days was enough to cover the entire world. But that's what the scientists. Well, how do we know there was actually this type of a greenhouse effect? This is S in Hebrew word, and this is M in Hebrew letter, and another one says. Each character had a meaning, just like a Chinese character is like the picture. In Hebrew, it's the same thing. It came from sun, and this came from water. Isn't that interesting? Why did they use this word? The ancient people believed there was water. So here are the people. When the sun goes through the water, and then we see the sun. It's not like you have two suns, but when they experience the sun, this is how they see it. Right? So this is another way to understand. The scientists, this is the only explanation. Another thing, before the flood, if you notice, people lived, average lifespan of the people, 1,000 years. But after the flood, all of a sudden it dropped down to 500 and then to 120 drastically. Because this water, this protection is broken, the lifespan has become drastically short. That's what we find in Genesis. Two things that we want to remember. He did not experience rain, yet he believed. Not only that, because God said, I'm going to condemn this world with flood. So, what did he do? He also testified. He condemned. So people came up to him and said, Noah, what are you doing? Why are you building this? Well, there's going to be flood. What flood? What are you talking about? And then he had an opportunity to talk about the wickedness, the sinfulness. So today, I want us to talk about our career should give us an opportunity to talk about faith and culture and the gospel. The way we work, like Noah. Right? Then they will come to Noah, and they did. And they asked him, and then he had an opportunity. And that's why he was a preacher of righteousness. He had an opportunity to speak against and condemn the world. So this is a tremendous challenge for us. And it is important. I believe in evangelism. I think we need to go out and share the gospel. But most, we spend long hour. We have an opportunity. And what does God do? He will give you the opportunity to talk about the gospel. But first, you need to have a different attitude towards your work.